Okay, so I'm going to kick off now. So one thing I did forget to grab is my clicker. Okay, so I'm going to kick off now. So one thing I did forget to grab is my clicker, because it's a bit ordinary not being able to show you a slideshow presentation. So for those of you that didn't hear before, my name is Justin Gill. I'm from Hema Maps. So what I do is I work in multiple different spaces at Hema. We're only a very small business. So for those of you that don't know who we are, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We are Australia's unique mapping company. We are really the only mapping company in Australia. We physically get out and off tracks and we physically map. Off-road mapping, off-road information isn't just about a line. So when you drive around a road in a residential environment, you're on a road. And if you're not supposed to be there, you're going to know there's going to be a mailbox and you know that's somebody's driveway. There'll be a road closed sign. You'll know that you're not physically allowed to be there. What we do within our mapping product is it's not just about that line, that road or track or driveway. It's about what we call information layers that go into that mapping product, which will notate them as private, whether you need permit zones, whether you're allowed to physically be there, because in the outback environment, you'll have no idea. You're talking 20,000 square kilometre cattle stations. You've got no idea if you're allowed to be there or not. So that's what we do with our mapping environment. So I get to do a bit of that as I travel Australia. So I've been off-road and in outback environments many times. But I'm going to take you on a journey that we did a month or so ago. We were test driving the LC76. She's fresh out of a complete rebuild. New engine, new gearbox, new suspension, new everything. There's nothing much that changes from the outside because it's an LC. They never change, a 70 series. But at the end of the day, the inside and the actual drive chain was completely rebuilt. So we wanted to test out some of the new changes we'd done. And to do that safely, I jumped onto one of our Hema tag-along tours that's run through Adrenalin Off-Road Centre. And the reason why I did that is because I had a really special journey with this one. My wife came with me. Now, I'm going to put this into perspective for you. She's never been camping in her entire life. She has never been in a situation where she's had to find some other way to go to the toilet without being able to press a flush button. Now, I didn't tell her any of this stuff. I wanted her to experience Outback Australia. And I'm going to talk a little bit about stuff through her eyes and my eyes, because they're very different experiences, okay? Let's jump on the journey and see where we went. So that's the LC76. That's what my wife packs. At the end of the day, it's kind of like, normally I would take that, and that. And in those, there's all my food. There's my clothes. So my clothes goes in one box, my food goes in the other box, and then I have things like mozzie repellent and raincoats and stuff in the other box. And that's all I take. Down the bottom of the LC76, you can see her soft drink cans. I would normally just have 40 litres of water, and that's all I take from a drinking water point of view. 40 litres is more than enough for me to drive across the Simo, up Hay River, and that's about 10 days worth there for me. Because I'm not using it for washing, I've also got washing jerry cans on board. So where did we start? That's my lovely wife. That's what she looked like at the start of the trip. I won't show the photos at the end of the trip. No, it didn't change. I was very, very lucky. Okay, and we started our trip at a place called Broken Hill. So Broken Hill sits over there, and we wanted to enter the Simpson via Mount Dare, but to get there, we had to drive up the Udnadatta track, and basically we figured if we're doing that anyway, why not have a look at some of the most magnificent places in Australia, one of them being the Flinders Ranges. So we hit the open road. We're driving, obviously, the LC76 bitumen to start with, normal tyre pressures. What do I drive with the LC? So she's got about a 2-inch lift, as you know, for Victoria won't say it's any different than a 2-inch lift. She's got 315s. She's got a brand new tyre on it that's never been seen in Australia. In fact, you can't buy them from Radar. Courtesy of Bob Jane's Team Arts, we're test driving a new Radar Extreme tyre. It is an amazing backwind tyre. I'll show you what the tread pattern looks like in a sec. You won't be able to buy them yet. In February, they're due to hit Australia after I've given them 12 months of testing. So we're driving through from Broken Hill, going out towards the Flinders Ranges, and in Australia you're always going to find some big things. So there's the big dice, and everyone loves those big dice or big things as you travel around Australia. This is the only product thing I'm going to talk about, your big things map. Make sure you grab it. Go and see those damn big things. They're all over the place. So we headed from Broken Hill, and our first stop was in Walker-Ringa Historic Site. Now, Walker-Ringa is as you're driving up towards the Flinders Ranges. So we've basically exited from the highway, and now we're heading up through Walker-Ringa here and heading up towards north into the northern part of the Flinders Ranges. So Walker-Ringa, Australia's got a lot of history, and a lot of our early settlements are great to have a look at. It was a mining settlement, so initially they were prospecting, and it's a great place to go and have a look around. So it gets you that taste of the outback. We're not really in the outback yet. We're starting to see some of those colours that you see in the postcards and those sort of things, but it's an amazing place to go and physically have a look at. And see some of these historic ruins. And especially when you're travelling through Australia, it's not just about going from point A to point B, it's taking some time to physically have a look as you're driving through. So it's well worth looking at it. And you see things like this. This is a reservoir, okay? So obviously in an outback area, you're going to have heat, you're going to have evaporation to protect water. This is actually a reservoir that's fully enclosed. And we had a look and saw how deep it was. It's about 6 metres deep in there. It still has water in there. But they built a roof over the top so that they would keep the water in and actually protect it from dust and other stuff getting into it. So it's all these sort of magnificent things you get to have a look. Jumping out from Walker-Ringa, going into our first campsite for the night, was a place called Chambers Gorge. Has anyone been to the Chambers Gorge in the Flinders Ranges yet? Amazing place. So this is where you start to see some of our First Nations people in terms of some of their work they've done from our Indigenous culture. So we've got things like rock art. You need permits to get in there. It is a exclusion zone. You need to make sure you do apply for permits to go into the Chambers Gorge area. Magnificent campground. So where are we at this stage? So we've come from the southern part of the map, and we've basically entered into Chambers Gorge, which is around that middle part of the map there. So we're heading into the Flinders Ranges, in the northern part of the Flinders Ranges. So what do you see at Chambers Gorge? So basically these whole gorge areas are full of Indigenous paintings, Indigenous rock art. It's well worth spending some time and just having a walk around and just looking at these sort of areas. So I'm supposed to be pressing play, but I don't know if it's playing. Nope, that's not working. Hang on, I think we're going to go now. Maybe my computer's not going to catch up with me. No, I don't think the videos are going to play, unfortunately. I'm sorry. So basically what you would have seen, all these sort of faces that you're seeing on the rock art, you can actually go out and have a good look at and see what's there. We've got a couple of products. We sell 3001 trips around Australia. Is absolutely full of Indigenous places to go. It's not just about natural wonders. It's not about man-made wonders. There's also our Indigenous First Nations places to go and visit and see. And just see some of the culture. So what do you get at night when you start to get out into the Flinders Ranges and into some of these amazing places? Is the first thing you're starting to see is sunset. And what we always advise is set up campsite no later than 4 o'clock every day. And this is the first taste my wife's had with camping. Okay, how do we travel? Very much don't take caravans. We very much don't take camper trailers or anything like that for for short journeys like the Simpson Desert. If we do pit stop and drop a camper, we will come back to them, but we tend to run without. Okay, so we normally try and make sure we're self-sufficient. The LC's upgrade managed to get a rooftop tent, which is nice not to have set swags up at the moment. That's an Alu cab sitting on top. So leaving Chambers Gorge the next day, we headed up towards the actual true start, I guess, of the Outback Highway, going into Maree and then onto the Udnadatta track. So that was the next part that we were journeying from. So we're basically heading over through Blinman, and I'll talk to you about Blinman, and this is how I convinced my wife to travel with me, to the Outback Highway, and then that's going to head up through Maree onto the Udnadatta track. So Blinman, why did I convince my wife? My wife is an absolute sucker when it comes to bakeries and pastries. And I tell you what, Blinman has this most amazing pastry that you need to try. If you're ever going through them, there's no cash for comments here. You've got to try it. It's called the Miner's Pastry. Okay? It's a pasty that's got pasty on one side, and then it's got an apple pie on the other side. So you get your lunch and you get your dessert at the end as well. Amazing thing to try. It's worth doing. This is what we encourage people to do, is visit all these outback places. You need to stop. Okay, you need to stop and spend some coin with these guys. I'll tell you why as we get a bit further down, okay? Because without them, we'd be in strife. We'll never travel, okay? So we're heading down from Blindman, and we're heading out the Outback Highway, going through Lee Creek. It's a little basic fact a lot of people don't sort of get with Lee Creek. Lee Creek was actually moved. Does anyone know why they moved the township of Lee Creek? They moved it because they found coal underneath the township that they built. So they had to move the whole township from where Lee Creek was, you can just see it in the map, just over to where Lee Creek is now on the actual map. They moved it to actually mine the coal underneath the township. So we're heading via Lee Creek. Remember, you've got fuel at Lee Creek, fuel at Lyndhurst. Really important golden rule of travelling in the outback: fill up where there's fuel. Don't fill up when you need it, fill up where there's fuel. Just fill up. Just put as much fuel in the tank as you can. So our first stop before we hit the actual Oodnadatta track is a place called Farina. So Farina was a township. So anybody that knows anything about the Oodnadatta track, is it was built along the old GAN line. So that used to follow our communication when we used to have the old telegraph line going from south to north. The old GAN line was built to support that network. Okay, Farina was a town that was built along the old GAN line. So this is the Outback Highway. Farina Ruins sits about here. We've come from Lee Creek, which was down the bottom of the screen there. We're heading up the Outback Highway. So Farina, great place to stop. And do you know why it's a great place for you to stop and for my wife is to stop? Is because they have an amazing underground bakery. So we're on the bakery tour. Kwandong pies, guys. Kwandong pies, grab them, put them in your freezer. Okay? Well and truly worth taking around with you. Vanilla slice is obviously my wife's treat. So at the moment, I've kept her relatively happy. She's camped off the grid for the first time, but she's got bakery. So far, I'm okay. We're seeing some good sites. We're seeing some terrific historic places to visit. We're seeing some great breathtaking places like Chambers Gorge as well as the Flinders Ranges, but we're still not really getting that big taste. There's still some other stuff for us to see. So we exit from Farina, and we're heading north up on the Oodnadatta track. So we're starting to talk corrugations. Okay, so now I'll jump out of my wife's vision and I'll put you into somebody that's experienced in outback driving in different terrain style, who does it professionally for a living. Now, why do I say that? Is because my job isn't to get YouTube likes when I smash my car and leave it in the middle of a desert, because people go, wow, that's ace, we'll go watch that, and you get YouTube likes. My job is I've got to get the car home, because if I don't get it home, I've got nowhere to go, okay? This is a vehicle that's built to go out and out and out around Australia. So things like tyres are really important. We've talked about the tyres I'm running. They're called Renegade X from the guys at Radar. But at the end of the day, it's tyre pressure. So dropping into a corrugated environment, Oodnadatta is a fairly easy corrugated road. I wouldn't call it difficult. There's two things you need to understand about corrugation. Two parts to the story. One is tyre pressure. The second one is speed. Okay, which one do you think's more important? Tyre pressure, put your hand up. Speed, put your hand up. Okay, good. Speed is probably the most important, but both are very, very important. Now, what you're trying to do is imagine a corrugation is like a dip like this, okay? So there's a gap between the hilltops. Now, your tyre is sitting on the hilltop, okay? Reducing your tyre pressure increases the length of your tyre. It makes your tyre longer. So it creates a bridge across the two hilltops, so you're not going down in the valley. Does that make sense? So that's the first thing, is tyre pressure. So I'd be dropping on my car, tyre pressure's down to about sort of 24, 25 PSI at this stage. It's fine. And I can do 80k an hour comfortably at that. And then speed. Think Evel Knievel. How do you drive over the top of a ramp with 40 flaming cars and then land on the other ramp? You hit speed, don't you? So speed is really important. The best way to flatten out corrugations is really hit that speed. Normally we try and sit at about 75 to sort of 80k an hour comfortably on the Oodnadatta track. Okay, you maintain control, drive within control, and this is where good tyres is really important, because if you're going to hit speed at low tyre pressure, what happens to your tyres? Who knows? Anyone to call that? No, not quite. They heat up. And if they heat up, that's where you run the risk of having damage done to your tyre, whether it's sidewall failures and various different failures. So heat is your biggest challenge when you're running lower tyre pressures, okay? So Udnadatta track, this board's really, really important. They close it at the even slightest smell of rain, okay? Why? We'll talk about that a bit later on through this slideshow. How am I going for time? I normally prattle on. I'm doing okay at the moment. Okay, so really important to understand your conditions. So we've come up the Udnadatta track, Lee Creek, Maree, and now we're actually driving across the Udnadatta track itself. So one of the things to see as you're looking at that big map, okay, that I've just chucked up on the screen, there's lots and lots of little things to see, whether it's ruins, okay, or whether there's some other amazing things to see, including things like mound springs, as well as having a look at some of Australia, or regarded as probably Australia's biggest geological natural wonder, which no one ever sees and everyone seems to forget about. We all worry about some great big rock out in Uluru and we forget about some of our really, really big geological features. And we'll talk about that in a sec. One of the things you can stop off and see is the famous Mutonia Sculpture Park. So Mutonia Sculpture Park was somebody just built it. It can get a bit radical. So some of his themes are, how should I say it, a little bit from the 60s and 70s, but it's worth stopping. A lot of people stop there. It does actually get quite busy. It's fairly windswept. There's no toilets there or anything magic like that. It's purely just to stop and have a look at. So we're heading up from Maree. We've gone through our various different locations. And now we're going to head up going towards William Creek, which is probably your next fuel stop. But on our way, we're going to go and see one of Australia's amazing features. We're going to have a look at Lake Eyre. Now that's the top of Lake Eyre. So that's, what do we call Lake Eyre? What's the best way to describe Lake Eyre? What is Lake Eyre? Australia's biggest drain. It's a drain. It's where all the water goes. Everything comes from north to south. It all goes downhill, doesn't it? Okay, so north to south, Australia's biggest drain, but it also hides a couple of other terrific features. So yes, it's a salt lake. No, you can't drive in it unless you don't ever want to get off it. Lots of stories about people dying where they've headed down towards these sort of areas. And there's some roads here, this one here, and this is why we talk about a decent map with no public access. People die on these roads because they drive down, can't get out, don't have communication, try and walk out. There is actually communication books you're supposed to use. I can tell you some stories around that space. But at the end of the day, it's why it's really important to know where you should and shouldn't be. But let's have a look at Lake Eyre. So Lake Eyre, obviously we talked about the drainage system. So we're talking about water coming down from the top of Australia right the way down. So it's Australia's big drain, is the best way to look at it. It hides a couple of amazing features. It's well worth stopping. These are just pictures of the signboards looking out at Lake Eyre. No, you can't drive on it. Yes, you can walk across it. Yes, it's well worth doing. And taking a couple of snapshots as you go through Lake Eyre. So just basically looking over that Lake Eyre basin, you're below sea level, okay? So there used to be I was heard of a story of a lot of the small plane pilots. They love to try and fly down below sea level. So Lake Eyre, you can get down to sort of where I was before in that first photo. We're probably down to about minus 24 metres below sea level. So that's why it's a drain. It's going downhill. It's going down below sea level. So one of the things to look at once you've exited Lake Eyre is to look at, I guess, something called the Bubbler and Blanchcup Springs, which hides something called Mound Springs, which is that allusion to Australia's largest natural wonder, which is, who wants to have a guess what it is? It's called the Great Artesian Basin. That is the largest underwater water source or artesian basin in the world. Something to be very proud of, something that you can't really drink. We're definitely not acclimatised to drink it. Okay, it's horrendous to drink. It's only bore water is its descriptor. But at the end of it, the indigenous population actually did learn to drink it, and they did use it. Where do you see it? You don't see much of it around the place unless people have created bores. But what you see it is in these things called mound springs. Okay, they often get overlooked as you're driving around. Okay, so mound springs have these bubbling waters come through. So that's your water coming through, but you get these little, it's almost like a volcanic eruption, but not with lava, with water. And they're basically being built up. And normally volcanoes, they build up with lava and they gradually became a cone, all that sort of stuff. We know that from geology. Mountain springs work the same way, but they get built up by the minerals that are contained within that bore water, that artesian water. Okay, quite well worth seeing. They've got very interesting ecosystems. One of these things to stop, it's not just driving the Oodnadatta track because I've got to get to Oodnadatta. Great space, but there's lots of stuff to do along the way. This is where it gets scary. And now we're going to start to talk about scary stuff. Okay, we were running the rain all the way through this expedition, okay? The challenges you have, and we were talking about tyre pressure and driving at speed to deal with corrugations, is when you're driving at speed on this sort of surface, it's treacherous. You very, very quickly can lose control. It's very slippery. It's very difficult to maintain control. So that's why one little bit of rain, like what I was showing you in the windscreen, the track got closed the day after I left. Okay, and when you're on a track like this, or whether it's the Simpson Desert or these areas, if there's a rain event, they will get you to hold in place. So you need to make sure you prepare that potentially you may have to hold in place. So be prepared for that. Okay, hence why fill up where you can fill up. Get more water when you need to get more water. Get more food when you need to get more food. Okay, because you don't know where you may have to hold in place. Okay, so what happens? What does this mud look like? We call it cement from an Outback point of view. Bull dust is a little bit finer, and that's further north, but it's very sticky. It basically attaches to you, and you start to become taller. So I get to become 6 foot as I walk through this wet, muddy surface. It's an amazing surface. It's horrible. I hate it. It does my head in. This is why it's worth carrying one of these decent devices, because you will have your wheel wells full of clayed mud, and it will not just drop off. You will need to pry it out of there, okay? So just bear that in mind. A good shovel is amazing. I'll talk to you about a good shovel in a sec as well. Don't get a garden shovel and think that's going to be my shovel I'm using. Use a good shovel, because if you need to start pulling mud out of your guards, you need to get under there. It's well worth it, okay? Talking about these tyres, amazing tyres with amazing tread. That's what the mud does to those tyres. And we're talking massive wide tread pattern. They should be shedding. They don't shed because of the surface that we're physically driving through. That's why it's dangerous, because you're driving at speed. Okay? Anyone that's done it will tell you that experience, unfortunately. It's good fun though. It's all different. Okay, so why do we have a good shovel? Now, this probably won't work. I'll see if I can get it to work. No. Oh, I've broken my video. That's going to kill me. It's come back, has it? Okay, video's working. Okay, so basically, obviously, you get a good shovel for 2 reasons. I'm not just promoting Dunny Buddy, but I'll tell you what, it's well worth getting. You also need a good shovel because you need to dig a hole to remove all that stuff, okay? What do we say? You normally dig about 30 centimetres down. Now, in certain areas, it's bloody hard to dig 30 centimetres down. So if you're in the Flinders Ranges, it's very rocky. So to try and dig down a hole for you to do your business, you need a decent shovel. Okay, it's one of these things that I see so many people head out with like little potting shovels that they're going to use. If you're in sand, that's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be very useful for you. A decent shovel will allow you to dig a hole quickly, because sometimes you're doing this and you've got to go. So at the end of the day, it's well worth it to have a decent shovel for multiple reasons. So we're heading now up from the bubblers. We're going through William Creek. When I got to William Creek, there was no fuel. Fuel truck was 2 or 3 days late. That happens. Sometimes I've gone to get fuel and they've gone, we've got no communication, we've got no FPOS, we've got no nothing. Take cash. Carry cash. Cash is king. Still lives in the Outback. Okay, you need it there just in case. Okay, fill up with fuel when you can. Because when we got to William Creek, there was no fuel. But I had plenty of fuel to get through. Okay. So heading up, again, we're following that old GAN line. We're looking at all that great history. Stop, take a sec, observe what's around you. It's well worth it, okay? So heading up, we get to the magnificent place of Oodnadatta, which is Pink Roadhouse, filling up for fuel. second last fuel stop really before we do our trip across the Simo via the French line, and then we went up via the Hay River track. So great spot to stop. Go and visit these guys. Go and buy yourself a pie. Go and buy yourself something from these guys. Because I tell you now, if Mount Dare didn't exist and the Udnadatta Roadhouse didn't exist, we wouldn't be travelling Outback because we couldn't carry the fuel. You need these guys to stay in business. This year they've had a worse season than they had with COVID. Anyone want to know why? Any guess? The weather. It's too wet. The French line was closed. The Simpson Desert was closed twice because of that rain event. They close it all down. No one comes through. So go and see it. I'll tell you what, Roadhouse, go and ask the owner of the old Roadhouse. Go and say, can I have some of your chutney? He'll go out the back. He'll get this amazing chutney he makes, like we're talking 44-gallon loads just about, and he'll give you some. It's the most amazing thing you'll ever have. Grown by tomatoes he creates out there. It's a fantastic thing to have. But it's worth stopping to visit. Heading from Udnadatta, we're going to head up towards Mount Dare, which is the top of the screen, okay, which is really your last pit stop. Now, Mount Dare is very much a rural roadhouse. Amazing Indigenous art. If you go into the place, have dinner there, go inside, you'll see this Indigenous art they have hanging from the roof. It is the cheapest Indigenous art you'll ever buy. You roll it up, put it in the car, get it framed when you get back. It's well worth it. That's a little trip for you. Last fuel, put every bit of fuel you can. Thanks, that's my wife's great photo. I was going to go back there, but anyone notice my license plate? Okay. Things shake to pieces on these corrugated roads, whether it's caravans or whether it's cars. They shake to pieces regardless of how well built they are. Be prepared, okay? Just talking about the different pubs to go into. So we've got a couple of different pubs. This is what you're going to see in these outback areas. Go and visit them. Just get a beer. Just get a soft drink. Just keep them in business, guys. Just keep them in business. So we're going from Mount Dare, which is in the top left-hand side of the screen, or top right-hand side of the screen for you. Left, I don't know, I'm losing track. Up there. And we're going to head down and start our trip through Dalhousie Springs. Now, I don't normally stop at Dalhousie. So Dalhousie, we always normally have a bit of a swim, okay? Enjoy the last showers from Mount Dare. Normally you can get a warm shower at Mount Dare. You're on bore water, so it's not great water, but it's fine. It's normally your first clean shower for a while. So Mount Dare, I've had a shower. Then we stick our feet in at the magnificent Dalhousie Springs, and we get our free pedicure. We get our free little fishies coming along, and they're chewing all that dead skin off. Normally you go into Thailand and you'd pay a fortune to put your feet in the buckets and they'd chomp all your dead skin off. Dalhousie, they do it for free. So it's well worth stopping. 20-odd degrees, 24, 25 degrees. There's cold showers there. A lot of people stop with caravans and stuff like that, so it can get pretty busy, which is why I tend not to stop, okay? And now we're going to take the actual trip across the Simpson Desert via the French line, okay? So the French line shouldn't tow. It's in the non-towing location. You'll do damage to the track. Okay, it's a very soft sand, so you can do some serious damage. We don't want A-frames digging in and causing damage. So we suggest strongly not to tow. There's a lot of things you need to know about doing desert driving and transversing. So now we're talking about dropping tyre pressures down again. So I'm running at about 20 PSI on the French line, and I drop down a bit lower in a couple of different locations. Okay, so not too low. We'll jump between high-range four-wheel drive, low-range four-wheel drive, okay, based on speed. And we'll talk about sand dunes, and we'll talk about the 1,200 sand dunes we're going to cross. So heading over with the Hema Simpson tour group, because I was hanging around down the back of it, and my wife was actually quite enjoying herself, and this is where it becomes really exciting for her. She got to see for the first time some amazing stuff she had never seen before. She just didn't understand the differences of sand dunes and how they change. So has anyone driven sand dunes before? Any experience of them? Do you know how sand dunes work? Okay, so you all know waves, okay? You've been to the beach, you've seen waves come in, okay? So think of the wave in two different directions. If I'm at the beach and the wave is coming into me, I see the wave cresting, don't I? I see it curling over. That's why the surfers surf the front of the waves coming into the beach. Cool? If you're in a boat and you're out the back and you're looking at the wave coming into shore, it doesn't look like it really changes much. It's quite sort of a rough sort of guide up, or a rough incline up, and a bit of a drop away towards the end. That's how the sand dunes are. The sand dunes are exactly the same as water waves, but they're sand waves. Now, in Australia, the weather tends to come from northwest down to southeast. So the way the waves are blown by the wind, which is what creates them, is when you're driving west to east on the Simpson Desert on the French line, is a lot easier than driving east to west. So I did what we call the chicken run. I did the easy drive, okay? A lot easier inclines, but it also means just be aware of a couple of things when you're approaching some of the sand dunes. So what sort of track conditions are you looking at? You get a bit of an idea about the treadle of tyres and all that sort of stuff. It's not that hard. It's soft, but you've just got to be aware of the corrugations that start to be in. They're very drawn out, so it can set up a wave-like motion in your vehicle and your suspension. Most tracks that you're driving up with the French line, you'll have a couple of different options. Now, that's going up into the actual dune itself. On the other side of the dune, though, is the drop is going to be sharper. Remember what I said about the waves? The drop on the other side will be sharper. So when you crest the sand dune, it's really important to be aware that the track will drop out from under you, okay? Constant speed. Try and limit change of direction. Pick your lines correctly, so try and drive in a straight line with constant speed, okay? That's your key part of driving on the French line, okay? And being aware that if you lose control, just let the vehicle take control for you, okay? Let it slow itself down, because sand is a resistance point. It will slow you down very quickly, okay? What do you see on the French line? And this is where my wife, with a Zoleo communicator, sent, I think it was 120 messages as I crossed the Simpson Desert, because every time she came across a dingo, she's just texting people and saying, I've just seen a dingo. So you're going to see lots of dingoes, and dingoes get a bit of a bad rap. So dingoes in Gari, Fraser Island, are quite different to the dingoes you're going to come across in the Simo Desert. In Gari, because there's a lot of human interaction, the dingoes they're not quite as, how shall I say, cautious of humans as what they are in the Simpson Desert. They're very cautious. They're an amazing animal. They are very much not a domesticated animal, but a couple of things to understand with dingoes. One is they won't attack something bigger than themselves. So if ever you come across, and where I've ever been concerned with dingoes is when you come out of the swag or the rooftop tent at night and you go out to do that wee walk at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, you've got your head torch on and bang, there's a couple of eyes there. They will, 99.9% of the time, they're just wanting to know what's going on. They're not going to attack you because you're bigger than a dingo. If you get to a situation where you are getting concerned that you're being stalked, there's predatory behaviour happening with the dingo, it's down on its haunches, it's ready in a pounce position, make yourself big. Do what they do with the old grizzly bears. Make yourself big, make yourself some noise, and walk yourself backwards, okay? Very simple to deal with. Gari's a bit different because they're used to dealing with man. It doesn't necessarily work that way. And because there's a lot more kids involved, a lot of food left around campsites. The other thing to bear in mind too, I'm just trying to think of anything. We've got any leather shoes on around here? There's probably a couple floating around. Just understand, leather shoes to a dingo is like jerky. So if you leave a leather shoe lying around your swag at night or down the bottom of your campsite, it's probably going to be eaten. Okay, so if you've got a shoe like that, make sure you take it up with you. Okay, just those little things about dingoes. Great animal, amazing to see them. They're not just going to be jumping around in front of you because they're cautious, but they will watch you. You will see them. They're not going to bolt from you like camels and kangaroos, which are normally quite difficult to see. Okay, some of the things you're seeing, this is just basically driving through the Simo across the French line, and then we exit the French line on the place called Popel's Corner. Now, to exit the French line, you're going to drive across a couple of white things. Those white things are obviously our gutter again, our big drain coming down from the west, from the north of Australia, as we're exiting down the Lake Eyre, and there's salt lakes that you're going to see. So driving across salt lakes, one thing to understand is stay in the tyre tracks that somebody else has driven. Don't go off them. Don't go driving. It's very tempting that you're going to drive across these salt lakes, but the challenge that you have if you do is that is going to be there for 5, 10, 15 years, okay? It's not like there's rain coming to wash stuff out. It's almost like you're graffitiing the salt lake. Okay, so drive on those tracks. So not just to make sure you don't get bogged or get into a situation where you may have to find some help to recover. You'll also leave an impression that you don't want to necessarily leave there. Salt lakes, and as you get further in, some of the most amazing sunsets are around the Salt Lake areas. Almost as good as my favourite outback track in Australia, which is the Hay River track. But it's well worth just sitting there and just looking at the different colours that you have come in. So our expedition, we've left the French line down the bottom of that slide and we headed north up the Hay River track. Now, one thing you're seeing, all permits, you need desert parks permits, multiple different permits to exit and enter these locations. Amazing places to go. Hay River is by far my favourite outback track in Australia. And it always gets overlooked because everybody always bails, goes down the QAA line and heads off into Birdsville. I've been to Birdsville many times, but Hay River is well and truly worth that extra bit of track. So the Hay River track, one thing to understand, every different sand dune you go over and you come down is a different vegetation path, and you see how the colours have changed. I can't zip back through slides, unfortunately, to go and give you some examples, but the colours change. Now the colour changes, obviously the bright red happens from iron ore. Okay, iron ore in different areas, and like with gold's not everywhere, it's in certain places. So that's why things like the colours of the sand changes. That's why vegetation changes, because the makeup of the dirt is different. Every different sand dune, you'll come down into a different ecology system. It's well worth having a look at. So this is the Hay River track. Nothing too exciting. We're going to head up the Hay River track and stop at a place called Madigan's Blaze Camp, which is the Madigan line runs east to west. Okay, there's some conversations I could have about the Madigan line, but at the end of the day, it's an amazing part of Australia. So Madigan Line, this is Blaze Camp. So this is one of Madigan's camps, Camp 16. There's a book there. You can sign in. You can see my signature a couple of times. It's an amazing spot to stop and camp and just have a look around you, okay? Rooftop tents, 100%. Have never had them before until I did this expedition. I'm now hooked for life. Even though they put a bit of extra weight on your roof, they are the best investment I've ever bought. So heading off, we're also fighting the weather. So the weather is coming in west down to east. Okay, remember top west down the bottom east. Okay, that's the way the weather systems come. Really, really important that you do have some facility to be able to track weather systems. So there's guys that we were going past us on the Hay River track, heading into the French line, we knew weren't getting through. They were going to get closed and stopped, okay? They would have to camp on site, and they would have shut down the Simo, okay? Because we knew the weather system. We had about a day to get out of there because you can track it pretty well, but you need to be aware of weather. It is really, really, really important in outback travel. It often gets overlooked, okay? Be aware of weather systems because when it comes, and that sand, that cement I was showing you becomes undrivable to some extent. So exiting the Hay River track, we exit via the worst track in Australia. Just one thing, I just chucked this up. This is just to remind me. A good investment when you're travelling outback Australia, and a lot of people miss it, it's worth grabbing either a bird book, a bird watcher's book, because you'll see a huge amount of, whether it's native budgies. Remember, budgies are a native animal in Australia. See the budgie flocks flying around the place, different birds of prey, as well as all the different vegetation. It's so unexpected. And there's a lot of questions you're going to have as you're travelling. It's worth having those little investments in some books. We don't sell them, but it's well worth having an investment and taking something like that with you because you'll be amazed how much you'll get out of it, okay? So we're exiting the Hay River. There's a couple of things called the Dingo Project, where it was an abandoned project to help water dingoes on the Hay River. You go through the Capricorn line, where obviously the line of Capricorn goes through, all those sort of things, and it gets warmer as soon as you cross the line. It's amazing. So we're going to exit the Hay River track, which is going through here. Last campsite for us was at a place called Lake Caroline. Okay, Lake Caroline's on the Hay River bed, a place where it's a dry clay pan. good fun to get on, good fun to drive around, good fun to have a bit of an explore. It's not like the salt pans where you're going to do damage. You can actually physically drive around them. We saw 6 dead camels that have been shot, and that's what does happen. Obviously, there's camel culling that does happen. You are more likely going to see camels on the Hay River track. You'll see droppings on the French line, but you're more likely going to see camels on the Hay River track, okay, if you're looking for the Outback camels. So we exited from the Dingo Well, Tropic of Capricorn, and we exited on Batten Hill Camp Road. Has anyone in the audience driven Batten Hill Camp Road? Because you'll remember it if you've driven it. Okay, it's the worst road in Australia. And I'm saying that. So we talked about corrugations like this, okay? And that's what Udnadada looks like. Nice little wavy lines. What do? We lower our tyre pressure down. We look at our speed. We bridge those troughs of the corrugations and we try and smooth out our ride, okay? Like this, okay? Batten Hill looks like this. So your gap between the peaks of the corrugation is massive. It's massive, and they're deep. They're like this, okay? And the gap is huge. So no matter what tyre pressure you go down to, you're going to struggle to breach those hilltops to try and smooth your ride out. Now, this was my first time driving this road. It's the first time I actually got to drive this one. It's normally closed when I've been up there. And I was lucky enough to be part of the Hema Tours group, and our tour leader, Ben from Adrenalin Offroad, was actually on this tour and done it multiple times. And he's tried just about every speed and tyre pressure known to man to try and flatten that out. He was sitting at around about 75, 80k an hour, sitting at about 10 psi, 12 psi, okay, to try and widen the tyre and speed to try and get. So what's the problem that I'm going to run into if I'm running that low tyre pressure and that speed? It was heat. So the only way to compensate is we do a 10 by 10 run, which is 10 Ks, okay, then stop. It's about a 70k run from the access to coming back out in the Plenty Highway. It's about a 70k run, so we're talking 7 blocks of run. So then we would 10 by 10. So 10 minutes to cool down, and then 10 Ks off you go. So just monitor your tyre pressures. Good tyres, you're going to be fine. But just bear in mind, you're down to very low PSI. Travelling at that speed to try and flatten it out, it's almost probably the most scariest driving I've done, regardless of hill climbs, falling down ledges, rock climbs, all that sort of stuff. It's scary because you're getting pushed into the different ruts within that corrugation at speed, okay? It's even worse. If you drive slow, you're basically banging down through each of them. It's like almost unbearable. It's like you're hitting a car crash every time you hit one. The walls of the corrugations is like you're driving into a wall. Okay, so you're trying to avoid having a bang, bang, bang. That's what it basically feels like. Okay, and that basically finished my journey back out onto the Plenty Highway, and then we exited via Alice Springs and we came home and we beat the weather, and the weather came in. Now I'm going to talk to you from my lovely wife's point of view. When she found out about the toileting situation, I almost got divorced on the spot. The only way I kept it going was saying that there would be showers every now and then, which there was. So we mount there, we used a shower. That was it. I didn't say any more than that. So, but at the end of the day, I think Udnadada track was cool. Was like, yeah, okay, lots of good stuff to see, sculpture parks, some cool little heritage stuff, some historical stuff, some cool little pubs to go into. Yeah, that's cool. It wasn't until she hit the French line and discovered that every single dune has a different ecosystem. You expect to go up, you look behind you, and what's there is completely different to as you come down. That's what killed her. She could not fathom that. Until you do it, until you experience it, you will not understand. The pictures don't do it anywhere near justice. The quietness of the environment, the clean skies at night, the stars at night, the environment took my wife, who is so much not a camper, and she won't come camping again unless I take her on a journey like this again, into the Simpson Desert, where she's gone, I want to go back. That's what the Simo does to you. By the time we'd hit the French line, she was like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay? You need to get out and do it. You need to enjoy these parts of Australia. It's not about the get there place. We encourage you to go and explore. Okay, our motto at Hema Maps is prepared to explore. Why do we say that? Because we just want you to prepare to go and explore Australia. It's not like you're the first explorers, but sometimes you're in such remote areas you feel like the first of explorers. So I'm still happily married. Pending next trip, which I've got some plans for where I think I can take her, that she's going to be okay. But I'm telling you now, it's one of these places where you'll go, no, I don't want to do it. It's going to be boring. It's just sand dunes. It's going up and down. No, it's not. It's not. So if you have any questions, I'm going to throw the floor to you guys. Shout your questions out. I'll try and repeat it so everybody can hear it, and I'm happy to answer you anything from a professional four-wheel driver's point of view or from someone that's just been to areas like this and give you my advice. I'm going to talk to you about fuel, all that sort of stuff. Realistically, hey, I used half of my main tank, really, from Mount Dare back to exiting onto the Plenty Highway, and I filled up again there. Okay, you don't use huge amounts of fuel. You use about double what you'd normally use. Okay, that's the best way, the best guide. Do you need to carry jerry cans? Well, it depends on your fuel usage. Jerry cans are worth having. One of the guys on our expedition punctured his fuel tank and lost a lot of fuel. And if we didn't have a spare jerry can, we couldn't have fixed up his fuel tank or fixed his fuel tank and got him back on the road with some extra fuel from some supporters. So that's kind of why you take the extra jerrys rather than necessarily fuel usage. It's actually not as bad as what you think. Water's probably the more critical one. That's why I take drinking water and always keep it separate to washing up water, and a couple of jerrys for washing up water is washing your dishes. That's where you kind of struggle, I find. Okay. Questions though, guys? What do you want to know? Yeah, go for it. How did you get the concrete off your tyres? It eventually came off. Eventually. Basically, I pulled off as much as I could from the guards. That was the biggest challenge because so much concrete hanging on your guards, it's starting to really weigh the car down. Not just that, but it's putting weight on mud flaps and all sorts of stuff, which isn't supposed to have a 50-kilo block of concrete hanging off it. But eventually it does come off. It does take time, though. Yeah, so we have a book which is called 3001 Things to Do and See Around Australia. It only just came out. We got a gentleman by the names of James Allen who actually spent 12 months just going around Australia. And we didn't want it to go and create the generic everything book. We wanted to create something different. And it's got Indigenous places to go, natural wonders to places to go and see. And it's here now. It's a Hema book. It's here now. You can go and have a look at it in the stand. But yeah, it's definitely worth having to help plan you, as well as another product we sell called Big Lap Bible, which is a great book. I'll leave it on. I'm not that stressed about the fuel usage. I use it so regularly, plus the fact it's got, I don't know if you probably can't see it on there, but it's got sat phone wired to it. It's got a few other things wired to it. To take it off, it's just not really worth it. Yeah, it's fine. It's a hard top, and I advise hard top. It's just the weight capacity about your roof and your vehicle you need to look into. I just leave it on all the time, but it's on a different space. If you want to have it removable, then obviously you wouldn't wire stuff to it unless you had some sort of way of disconnecting lighting and sat phone and that sort of stuff through it. 85, 87 is mine. Yep. Yeah, so then to get them off, they're bloody hard to get off. The only way to really get them off is we have had a vehicle in our office that we take one on and off with. We use a forklift, but that's kind of cheating. So that's how I see most people do it, is find a mate with a forklift to take it off. You can get them off. Treat it like an engine block to some extent. If you've got some way of ratcheting it off, you can. But we just leave, mine stays on permanently. That's why I've gone hard top, because that way it's not going to get smashed around and ripped like the soft cover rooftop tents. Good question, though. So in terms of the desert crossing permits, the best place to start is Parks South Australia. They will have links right through to every area that you need to go to. So SA Parks, and they do also all the weather stuff as well. So they've got a really good weather service, one of the better states for that. States do everything differently, so no state is uniform. There is no uniform guide for anything. You need to track everything down yourself. So every different state you go into will have a different permit. It's just a matter of you get what's called a Deserts Parks Pass, which is the best one to get, and you'll need a separate one for Flinders. There's separate passes. Anything else? Yeah. Can we see the video of your presentation today somewhere? Yes, it's been recorded. So I'm live on well, I'm not live yet, but we're recording these. So I think they're on the Caravan website, so CIA's website. So they've got the Caravan shows, Leisurefest shows website. I think they're broadcasting those on there, so you can see them again. Yeah. That's right. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. So I think I've finished my questions. I'm going to go back to do some real work. Now I've got to tag you on my adventure and trip around Australia. But if you have any questions, come and see me back on stand, and I'll see you again next time I do a presentation. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Should we tell them our favourite getaway spot?
Yeah, go on.
It's the Melbourne Caravan and Camping Leisurefest for the latest and greatest of everything.
Let's get going.